called the Fund for New Jersey that was thinking about, do you really want to put that kind of investment on the waterfront amidst the, at that time, really broken waterfront landscape? It is an incredible movement over a 30-year span of time. These things don't happen quickly, right? Over a 30-year span of time to find us here today at the headquarters of a major American corporation who has staked their claim here in Camden. I want to thank American Law. We're joined by the CEO, and to introduce the CEO, we've got LNJ's own class of 2018, Denise Free, Head of Communications and External. Denise, take it away.
Thank you very much. Hi, welcome everybody. Congratulations on being in Lead, New Jersey. I did it last year, as Mark said, and it was an amazing experience, and I'm very jealous that you get to go through it, because, you know, if I could do it again, knowing now what I knew then. But you already did SimSoc, so. Thanks for coming, and I'm not going to say too much because I want to give the floor to our wonderful CEO, but I just want to say a few words about leadership. Susan's story is obviously an amazing leader. What makes her a good leader is her resume, which I'm sure you've all seen. Nuclear engineer, worked her way through the electric industry, came over to the water industry. Several years ago as our CFO here at American Water, was promoted to CEO a year later, and has been everything a leader could be. That's what makes her a good leader. What makes her a great leader is her passion, her enthusiasm, her commitment and drive for us to be the best company we can be, and the commitment she has to her people, to safety, to customers, to the safety of the water we provide. Everything about that makes her a great leader. But what makes her an exceptional leader in my mind is her heart. Her belief that our values lead us. We have our mission, we know what we're doing. It's not just what we do, it's how we do it. And that's what I think brought us to Camden, and that's what, in my mind, makes her an exceptional leader. So I'm thrilled to introduce our President and CEO, Susan Story.
With an introduction like that, I should just sit down. There's only one way to go. Now, I want to welcome all of you here to our corporate headquarters. We really appreciate you being here. We're very excited about being here in Camden. What I want to do very informally over the next few minutes is talk a little bit about history and how history guides us to where we are today. So when you think about history, you know, you think about how you get to know people, and you all have gotten to know each other, but one of the best ways to get to know someone is to know what their background is, to know where they came from, to know what experiences they've had, because we're all a product of where we've been, what we've done, those type of things. And if you think about it, cities and companies are the same way, because a company is just a collection of people. A city is a collection of people. And if you really want to understand a city or a company, just like people, you need to know where it came from, the experiences that it went through, because it's the experiences of the people. So let me talk just a minute about the history of Camden. Then I want to talk about the history of American Water, because it has a lot to do with why we're here today. The history of Camden. Is there anybody in here who lives in Camden or has lived in Camden? Well, thank you. Outstanding. So first of all, Camden, interestingly, in 1626, the West India Dutch Company actually set up what they called Fort Nassau, right here where we are today in Camden. And they did it because of the fur trade along the Delaware River. And then years went by, it became a bustling center for trade. Then in 1828, Camden was incorporated as a city. And the interesting thing is that from the late 1800s through about 1950, 1960, Camden was one of the top industrial cities, not just in the United States, but the world. In fact, when you think about it, we know Campbell's, which is still here, came here in the late 1800s, but also the RCA Victor Company, because of course Thomas Edison was in West Orange, New Jersey, where he set up his labs. And by the way, we have a picture, I think it's downstairs, but it's in our history book, where Thomas Edison himself signed the service request order for water for his labs where he worked from 1891 until 1930 something. So we think he was really smart because of the water he drank. And that's why he was able to come up with over 1,000 patents. But anyway, so in 1828, it became this bustling center. And in fact, in 1950, there were over 43,000 manufacturing jobs in Camden. And in 1950, the population of Camden was almost 125,000 people. And the New York Shipping Company actually built some of the largest carriers that were in place during World War II. And during World War II, the New York Shipping Company right here in Camden was the busiest shipyard in the entire world in World War II. All of that right here in Camden. So you think about the fabric of the history of this country, Camden is interwoven throughout that history. It has a wonderful, wonderful history. Then, as happened to a lot of industrialized cities, manufacturing starts going down, and then by 1980, the population is down to 85,000. Manufacturing jobs have gone from 43,000 to 10,000. And then as you get into the 90s, you got into further decline for the city. What's important is that then you look at the visionary leaders who decided in the 1990s and the early 2000s, and then under Mayor Red, a few years ago here in Camden, that we're going to rebuild the city back to the greatness that it had for the centuries before. So the history of Camden, I think, is the history of America. It is the history of a city that grows, that's living, that now is in a place where it's coming back to the greatness that it's had in the past. And I think it's really important for all of us to understand what that history is as we're here, because again, we're defined by the history. So that's Camden, and a little bit about Camden's history. When you look at American Water's history, we've been a company since 1886. We've been in the Kramer Hill area of Camden since 1893. So Camden's history is kind of interwoven with our history. We became, the predecessor for our company was actually in 1818 in Pennsylvania. And so when you look at the history of our company, to get us up to the modern day, we were headquartered in Pennsylvania for the early years from 1886. 1891, we moved headquarters to New Jersey. Early 1900s, our corporate headquarters were moved to New York City. Then in 1955, we moved back to Pennsylvania and Philadelphia. And in 1976, the headquarters were moved to New Jersey. So we've had this Pennsylvania-New Jersey thing going. And the reason for that is, to tell you just a little bit about American Water, we're the largest water and wastewater utility in the United States. We're on the S&P 500. We're about a $19 billion company. We're on the New York Stock Exchange. But we grew up buying small water systems throughout the whole country. Our two biggest states are Pennsylvania and New Jersey. And interestingly, those two states are about half of our business, even though we serve 14 million people in the country and have operations and regulated operations in 16 states and market-based in 45 states. But they're about even. About 25% of our business is New Jersey, 25% Pennsylvania. So what does that have to do with why we moved to Camden? So we grew so quickly that we were in 5 locations in southern New Jersey, all in suburbs. We were at Woodcrest, we were at Mount Laurel, Church Road in Mount Laurel, we were at Voorhees, and so we leased most of those facilities. So we decided a few years ago we were going to look for a new place for our corporate headquarters. And we narrowed it down to Pennsylvania and New Jersey. Because, number one, that's where most of our employees in corporate, they live. And number two, that's been our history, and it's our 2 biggest states. So when we narrowed it down, there were 3 locations we ended up narrowing down to. One was Navy Yard, South Philadelphia, and there were 2 locations in Camden. So why did we choose Camden? Well, there are 2 reasons that we chose Camden. And a lot of it is the tax credits did have a big had an effect in us choosing between Navy Yard, which we went, and Navy Yard is a very cool place. You know, it was great. But the 2 places in Camden, there was just something special, especially about this one. So we chose this location, even among the 2 places in Camden, because we decided that we wanted to be part of the heart of the city. We didn't really want to be in a commercial park. We wanted to be where the people are, where the schools are. Because one of the things about our company is we have as one of our values the safety, we have environmental leadership, we have teamwork, but part of our core is making sure that communities are better because we're there. And we serve 1,600 communities throughout the United States. And it is part of our measurement that our community is better because we're there. Are we involved in the schools? Are we involved in health and human services? We have an American Water Foundation that we basically funded from the profits, some of the profits we've had over the past few years. And we're very involved in building splash pads in underprivileged, for example, water parks in underprivileged communities throughout the United States, Gary, Indiana, Peoria, Illinois, in New Jersey. So we're busy looking at what we can do for communities. So when it came down to not just the location that our employees would want to come to and they live close to, but where can we make the biggest difference? And this is where you are now. We started moving in October of last year. We were very involved with the Camden community to begin with. In the past 8 years before we ever moved here, we donated $4 million in the community, including $1 million for Kramer Hill Now, parks, different things like that. For the Salvation Army Kroc Center, we donated another $1 million. We worked with a group called HopeWorks here. Anybody familiar with HopeWorks? It's kids involved. We do a tremendous amount of technology in our business. We're very excited to be on the leading edge of technology and the deployment of technology for clean water and customer service and customer experience. We have basically invested over $500,000 into internships with HopeWorks. They're coming doing technology work for us, including using GPS to locate our assets located throughout New Jersey. So we're very excited about the fact that we've been involved with this community before we ever moved our headquarters here. But then when we did construction, about $13 million went directly into Camden businesses. We put a priority on making sure that Camden businesses were part of the construction. And about 75 of the employees involved in construction were here from Camden, were actually Camden residents. And then since then, what we're very excited about, one of the first things we did was donate $200,000 for a STEM lab at Woodrow Wilson High School to help build a STEM lab to get kids excited about science, technology, engineering, and math. And because we have so many engineers and we have an R&D group with 15 scientists and a technology group with about 200 people, most of them located here. And we're hiring technology graduates from schools all over the country, including many from Princeton and Rutgers and a lot of different schools. We're bringing them in here. They want to be coaches. They want to be mentors for the kids in the schools. I'm very excited. About 2 weeks ago, we had, have any of you heard of the group STEMinists? We talk about STEM for women. So we actually had several of our engineers and scientists. Of our 15 scientists in R&D, 7 are women. And we had a couple of our PhD scientists, several of our engineers who are women. And we actually had a meeting here for several of the middle school and high school students in Camden. And what we did, it wasn't just like you're sitting here listening to me talk and saying, when is she going to stop? But we actually took water samples from 4 different water sources in the region, set up a mini lab for them here in the building, had them actually go through water quality testing to determine what was in the water, what treatment was needed. So they came in for half a day to actually see how fun science could be, with real world labs set up right here. And then they were able to be bussed over from their schools to come here and just see how cool, and also how sustainable and how their altruism to do things to help the planet and their communities could be partnered up with STEM and getting good, stable jobs. Because we expect to be recruiting tremendously from this area. We are looking at probably hiring another 30 to 40 technology folks in the next 6 months. And most of those jobs will be right here. So we're very excited about some of the things going on, and Camden is our home. And just to kind of wrap all of this up, you know, when you work at a job and when you get to the point that you retire, you want to look back and say something was better because I was there. You want to say the communities, these people, it's not just about the company making money, which it has to do to stay in business, but we really believe at American Water that you can do well by doing good. You can do well financially by doing good. And that's why we believe in what's called the ESG principles of environmental, social, and governance. Long-term financial sustainability can only come about when you're doing the right things for your employees, you're doing the right things for your customers, and you're doing the right things for your communities. We believe at American Water, when you think about what we do, and we tell our employees, you know, what we do is a calling, not a job. And here's why. At the end of every water pipe, there's a family that's trusting that the water they get from us is going to be safe, and that they can feed it to their children, that their children can drink the water and not get sick. At the end of every fire hydrant, people's lives are at stake, making sure that the pressure is there on the water hydrants. And every wastewater plant that we operate is a barrier to disease. We have scientists who are partnering with the EPA and the Centers for Disease Control to make sure that the things we're doing in our R&D group right here in Camden, the research we're doing right here in Camden, is used to benefit people throughout this country. We partner with global water research foundations. There's the Global Water Research Environmental Foundation and the Global Water Foundation that we do projects. And we do projects with them. We partner a lot with the country of Israel because they do a lot of water because they recycle or desalinate 80% of their water supply. We're doing a lot of work with recycling. I don't know if you've heard this building. At the top, there are 2 green spaces. We actually collect water here and we recycle it and use it for toilet flushing and irrigation. We're Platinum LEED certified here from an energy standpoint, the lighting standpoint. We want this building to be a model. We bring people from all over the country here and we bring people from all over the world here so that they come in to the largest water utility in the country and come here and visit with our scientists and our engineers. And they're right here in Camden looking at what a great place this is. And we are so happy to be able to be here. Our employees love it here, and we love being a community partner. We believe that our home here is not just to help our employees do great and be great, but to help the community be even better and greater and to help be part of the renaissance that is Camden. So just a little bit about why we're here. Hopefully, I know you'll hear from Denise and others, and I have time. I do have a hard stop in about 5 minutes, but if anybody's got any questions, as you can tell, this is a calling for us, and we believe being here in Camden is part of who we are as people and not just what we are as a company.
Great history. So one of the topics we're going to be discussing today is incentives, and that has been a topic of discussion lately amongst the leadership here in New Jersey. You made a statement that you know that was one of the reasons that you were here. One of the talks right now is capping incentives. Do you think that would have had an impact on your decision making?
I don't know. It depends on what the cap is. I will tell you that incentives were part, but it wasn't the whole thing. But the incentive, if for us, and let me make something clear, New Jersey American Water would never move out of New Jersey and isn't included in our building and the number of employees in our building. We're actually going to move them here, but they don't count in terms of the certification numbers that we did, which is a good thing. So the corporate business, which serves the whole country as well as our market base, we could have gone anywhere. I think that's a big thing. I think it's like, well, would you really have gone? We looked at a site at the Navy Yard. But the issue of being in Camden and the incentives together were very powerful to where about a third of the way in the process, we said, let's just look at the 2 sites in Camden. And we could have if it had been capped, because that's not the whole reason we're here. And by the way, a lot of the money that we're donating, through our foundation, through our employees, since last October when we moved in, including September was our month of service, we put 5,000 volunteer hours in this community. That's not part of the incentives or anything. So I think the incentives help. I think we have to be smart about looking at them. Many states. I've actually worked in 7 states throughout the country. Obviously, I'm not from New Jersey. You can tell from my accent. I moved here from Atlanta. But, I think that you have to judiciously use incentives. I think they do make a difference. But I don't have a view on whether the capping or not. I think that the state has to do what's in the best interest of the state, but also not lose sight of the impacts of economic development. Yes, sir.
I was just curious about the STEM program that you had going on at Woodrow Wilson. How long has that been going on right now?
Well, we did the $200,000 donation in early December, and I don't know, Denise, if you know where they are. They're building this STEM lab. That was kind of a kickstart for them to start building it up. I know that we have some of our employees who are working with them to help design it and everything else.
I guess I was wondering about the continuity plan. Do you plan on offering these kids at some point, like when they get old enough, to work perhaps internships and then tracking them through college and then seeing how far they go, how much of an impact it has long term? Absolutely.
In fact, I will tell you, we need the young people in this area. In utilities, in our company, in the next 5 to 10 years, 40 to 50% of our employees can retire. So we are talking about bringing some people in internships. We have a very strong Holly Rockwood, who's in your class, she is in human resources. We have a strong internship program. We're also looking at things in STEM, but one of the things we're looking at too is in art. You know, are there ways we can just have art programs and display artwork of some of the youth of Camden here in the building? So yes, this is not a one-time thing for us. We're now part of this community for years and years and years, and we're going to be doing this. Part of it is because it's the right thing to do, but the other part is it's a business necessity for us to be able to recruit people here to be able to do the jobs that we're going to need for the future. And I think businesses that don't get that, you don't need to look at an investment in education or internships as just a charity. It is a business imperative to get our work done in the future, and I don't think enough companies are looking at it like that. So
We have
thank
time for
you.
one more question.
Okay. Yes, sir.
What's your biggest surprise since moving to Camden?
I have to tell you, how cohesive the community leaders are. I knew they were cohesive, but it's for real. And I'll tell you, the police chief, I see him about every month. He comes by and we visit. They work so closely with the mayor and the transition between Mayor Red and Mayor Moran. And I have to tell you, it's just, there is such a shared vision for this community that you don't see most places. You see people in Camden pulling together, whether they're elected officials, educate, and you're going to hear some of the educators today. You're going to hear Phoebe Haddon, who's phenomenal, Rutgers, pulling together with the companies who are here. I'm not sure I have seen so many different leaders in lockstep about what they want for this community anywhere I've ever been. It's so inspiring. Thank you all. Welcome
You will see on all of the exit doors a sign that says safety first. And so I'm going to ask Denise Free to come back up in a minute and describe the emergency evacuation procedures from the building that hopefully we won't use. Denise.
All right, thank you very much. So yeah, safety is a value and a goal here at American Water. It's the most important thing we do. So when you came in, you saw, you came up the elevator. We don't want you to do that. If for any reason we need to evacuate the building, you're gonna go out there's two doors, front and back of the room. You're gonna go out there, turn left, and there's a stairwell. You can take the stairwell down to the first floor, and then you're gonna go out the front of the building and make a left. And our rendezvous point is, what was it, Holly?
It's on the back.
What is it?
It's on the back.
Oh, it's on the back.
Corner of.
Now bear in mind, I moved in here a month ago, so you have to cut me a little slack. You go along Victor Place, which is the street in front of the building. The street on the river is Water Street. The street in front is Victor. So you're gonna walk up Victor Place to the north muster point on the north side of the parking garage. And I think most of you probably parked in that garage, at the intersection of Victor Place and Penn Street. Stay with your group. Do not leave the group. There's also an AED machine if anyone bless you, if anyone is in distress. Holly has been designated to get the AED machine in case it's Holly that's in distress. I told Jen where it is, and I'll tell Mark where it is. You go out here, make a left, make a right, and another left.
It's along the windows.
And it's along the windows. There's also fire extinguishers along that wall, again, outside that part of the hallway. I think that's about it, right? But hopefully that won't happen. So enjoy your day. Thank you so much for being here. We're thrilled to host. Thank you. I'll leave these around in case we need them.
Thank you, Denise. Now, because of her cautionary note, how are you feeling, Holly? You feel like you'll be able to help us out here? Throughout the day, please make sure Holly gets enough to eat, stay safe, so that we might be able to leave the building safely. All right. It is pretty tough to build on what Susan just said about the history and the purpose. I can't describe to you what it's like for me personally to be in this space. because having worked in this town over a 30-year period, I can tell you the false starts, the expectations, the very well-intentioned efforts, including not only New Jersey state government, but federal government. In the 90s, Vice President Al Gore came to town to announce $20 million in federal money to be pooled with about $100 million in state and private funding to revitalize Camden. So one of the stories of urban New Jersey, and indeed this plays out in places like Detroit and Oakland as well across the country, is we've been trying for decades various strategies to try and revitalize some of these centers. And to stand here today and know that we are turning a fundamental corner in this state by having not only this anchor institution at the foot of Cooper Street, and I can tell you, 30 years ago, walking down Cooper Street was a very, very different experience than what you experienced driving in this morning. We're blessed to be here for our economic development seminar. This is the first time in 33 years that Lead New Jersey will hold this seminar in Camden. We have held this seminar in Newark, we've held it in Jersey City, we've also held it in Morristown and in suburban New Jersey to tell different stories about the state. We have always held our education seminar in Camden, not to show how poorly urban education is delivered, but to dispel some of those myths and to take our classes of Lead New Jersey to islands of excellence around the city. For the first time, we are taking that seminar in May to Newark, which will be fascinating for all of us. And we've moved the economy seminar here to highlight some of what is clearly the bricks and mortar in the town. We're going to hear from Subaru, new headquarters. We're going to hear from Philadelphia 76ers, who moved across the river to be in Camden. But let's start at the beginning, because buildings are nothing more than walls. So that you can plunk down a building anywhere the economic incentives may work. But are you contributing to the revitalization of your host community? And that's where Dr. Song was so strong on this, was that no, we're not just parking people in this building and building a parking deck across the street. We're not going to be an island unto ourselves. We're going to take that civic responsibility and be part of the fabric of the community. And we're going to go back and forth over these 2 days, especially today, talking to various leaders, not only about the economic development decisions that brought you to this town, but the human side. What are you doing now that you're here? Susan mentioned some of the history. The very first human recording was made in the RCA Victor building across the street. And that was around 1913, 1914, right around in there. The great Italian tenor Caruso came to Camden, New Jersey, and recorded his voice on one of those wax cylinders that we've only heard about, right? And preserved his voice singing some aria, I don't know what it was. And people were, of course, amazed that you could even do that. So Caruso's voice was recorded for all time across the street. Walt Whitman lived in Camden for a number of years. His home is a historic landmark and preserved. One of the things that Whitman observed while being here is in the old days, before we had bridges and the Delaware was quite a difficult river to navigate, we had significant ferry services up and down the Jersey shoreline here in Delaware, connecting us to Pennsylvania, one of the largest services was Cooper's Ferry. The landing of Cooper's Ferry, approximately at the base of what's now the Ben Franklin Bridge here, was also one of the largest slave auction sites in the northern part of the colonies and the United States. So slaves were auctioned right outside the door here for decades. Whitman is one of the people who commented on that. I think that was shut down. I'm not an expert at this, but I think in the 1830s, something like that. But lest we think, as we often do, that the slave economy was something that happened in the American South, had to do with the Southern plantation culture, and that somehow north of the Mason-Dixon line, not only were we immune from that scourge, but also immune from the economic advantages that all Americans, except for those enslaved, enjoyed by having an enormous free, call it that way, labor pool. Working in those fields, working in those cotton fields, working in tobacco. Who do you think benefited from that trade? Northern bankers, northern industrialists. And yes, there was slavery in New Jersey as well. So a little bit of that economic history is very important to remember. Next month, we're going to be meeting in Princeton as part of our diversity seminar. And I want to thank Jill Berry, the Morven Museum. She'll be hosting us. Thank you, Jill. And we're going to hear from a group of people a little bit about that slave history in New Jersey and in the Princeton area itself. So a building can be walls, or it can be an opportunity to think more broadly about community and economic development hand in hand. Last month, we started our seminar year by talking about the state budget. And at that time, I said how important it is to think about that not as a dry recitation of numbers, but as the embodying document of our values, especially values at the margin. Meaning, the next dollar in, where would you expend it? Would you expend it on corrections and law enforcement to bring down crime and to feel safer? Would you invest that money in early childhood education so that all kids start school prepared to learn? Would you care for the sick and the elderly, right? Since we met, the governor has introduced his proposed 2020 budget. Some of us here were together just 2 days ago to hear from the state treasurer describe some of the outlines of that budget at a breakfast meeting jointly held by the State Chamber of Commerce and New Jersey Business and Industry Association. And I want to thank Wayne. I was able to attend as his guest on behalf of NJTIA. And there we didn't drill down too far, but we saw some of the overall outlines. While it is not part of the budget, it is certainly part of the discussions this year. The economic incentive programs that organizations like American Water have benefited from to make it economically viable to be in places like Camden sunset this year on June 20th. The governor, as you may have heard, is a fairly staunch critic of how some of those programs have been run and how money has been dispersed to corporations when they have built and lived up to their obligations of employment, both retaining employment in the state and attracting new employment. We're going to talk to a number of experts today about that. The governor has put forth, is it Wayne, 4 or 5 programs? I can't remember. There's a there's a bunch of new incentive programs that are being proposed to replace those that are sunsetting. Many critics say those new programs will not suffice. They don't cover the same kinds of economic activity as the previous incentives, number one. Number two, per Wayne's question a minute ago, the new programs will all be capped. And keeping in mind, we're going to be talking a lot about competitiveness of New Jersey. This is a tough one, but you can't just have incentive programs. They've got to be competitive with like states. Some of those are neighbors, New York and Pennsylvania, but some are like in terms of destinations. So you're also looking at California, you're looking at Maryland, you might even be looking at one of the Carolinas or Michigan. So it's not just proximity, it's like states. So when you cap incentives, and these are all debatable points, but are you handicapping yourself in terms of incentives? On the other hand, when you're giving away, as the detractors will say, potentially millions and maybe even more dollars in foregone revenue for a cash-starved state budget, as we learned, right? What are you getting in return, right? Are you getting a fair return on that investment? And some of the revelations contained in Governor Murphy's report released a couple of weeks ago suggested that lax enforcement was also suspicious. Are we following up with those corporations who said, here's the number of jobs we'll create, here's the number of jobs we'll be bringing into your state? Did we follow up to make sure that that contractual obligation is met? So I think we're also going to see renewed enforcement there at the State Economic Development Authority to ensure that when we offer incentives as part of the deal to relocate, that in fact those obligations follow through. I will presage, we were going to have with us today Executive Vice President of the EDA, Lori Mateus, who's an LNJ graduate and a board member of LNJ and a dear friend. A death in her family yesterday precludes her from coming. She's going to family services today. Totally understandable, but our primary voice that we were going to bring to say, okay, tell us about the EDA incentives. How have they been run? I apologize. We'll have to hear from her at a later time, but we will hear from a number of vantage points on that issue. I want to take just a moment to recognize in the back of the room several American Water alumni. Please don't, as I introduce these gentlemen, please don't judge all of us by, well, never mind. I'm going to just introduce Nicholas and Thomas, but why be formal? Nick and Tom. Thank you. Did you enjoy your time with us?
Did, 2017.
Did you learn things that you would have found no other place?
Only from you.
I asked these fellas to stay for a moment so that I could, have a little in-place advertisement. Great to see you. Congratulations on your new home.
Thank you.
We also have in this very class individuals beyond American Water who have benefited from some of these incentives. Mr. Quinn, Audible would not be in downtown Trenton.
Newark.
Where did I say? Trenton. Sorry, my mind is on the state budget. Yeah, you're not in Trenton. I hope you know that. You're in downtown Newark without these very incentives.
Actually, the original move, we did not take any incentives, but we are expanding into a church that we're renting right now.
All right. Joe Myers just walked in the room. Hello, Joe.
Mark, how are you?
Lead New Jersey alum as well. Chief Operating Officer at Coopersbury Partnership. the group that, as I mentioned, in its early days, helped bring about the Camden Aquarium, which is right up the street, which was going to be one of the signature pieces on the waterfront that we would build from to create an industrial and employment strip here. Now, as you look south out of this building, you'll see nothing but building after building. But let me tell you, there were long stretches of time when there was a lot of broken teeth along this waterfront. Joe's going to help us with the panel that's going to start in a few minutes, but we'll take a break and convene back and at 10 o'clock. Thank you.
Manifesting in so many ways.
So yesterday's meeting, yeah, I think look at just marketing right on campus. Not to go to the comments of him and everything.
Yeah, right.
They